And welcome to today's episode on the Moving from Fear to Trust podcast series. I am so excited to introduce you today, my special guest, Andy Wren from Conella. And the reason why I'm so excited to have this conversation is because a decade ago, I had a life-changing consultation with Andy's mom, Barbara, in her home after suffering from depression and anxiety and low energy for many years, prescribed antidepressants for 4.5 years. And I remember getting to that stage where I was just so fed up with having to take medication, being so young. And I went into that room with Barbara, and she just basically blew my mind to the powers of the body and healing and all this information that was not shared with me when I went to my local GP. And it really just transformed the whole direction of my life. So I'm really passionate about sharing this conversation with you today. So thank you so much, Andy, for coming on today.
Oh, very much my pleasure, and thank you for the opportunity to share with you guys. So that's greatly appreciated.
Yeah. So first, I'd like you to kind of delve into like your work with what you're doing now with Conella and this whole philosophy of electromagnetic nutrition. I'd love you to share with us about that.
Okay. Well, a lot of people ask, what is electromagnetic nutrition? Why is that different than normal nutrition? And it starts from the very basis that we look beyond what I would call biochemical observation. So a lot of the treatments that happen within nutrition are based on so-called evidence-based research. Well, the problem with most of that is that 50% of research is known to be either misleading or incorrect. So by following the logic of just looking at lots of bits of research, for example, vitamin E, looking at high blood pressure, 1/3 of people got worse, 1/3 of people got better, 1/3 of people it did nothing. Of course, if you're looking at evidence-based, you could use that to defend any situation. There's evidence that it's either good, bad, or indifferent, if you like.
Yeah.
Whereas what we would look at is what was different between those three groups. Why did it have that effect in this group or in that group? And this would be looking more back towards Beauchamp's, looking at the terrain, looking at the predispositions of the person. But to explain the reason we picked out electromagnetic nutrition as the name for what we do is that looking beyond the biochemical. So if you looked at something like mitochondria, which I think we'll probably come on to shortly, normally you'd be looking at supplementing things like vitamin D, certain forms of choline and so on to try and stimulate that process or cleanse that process.
Yeah.
We would actually say, well, actually, why adding vitamin D, for instance, would it have the effect of raising your energy or all these other health benefits that people associate with it?
Yeah.
Well, the truth is that what it's all doing is it's stimulating the biophoton activity. And biophotons are little batteries within the cell that start to vibrate when they come into contact with light, particularly sunlight, which then go on to create ATP, which is actually one of our main energy sources. So we are designed much more to take our energy from the sun than we are just from what we eat. But also we like to look at and try and understand how we can evaluate the electromagnetic conductivity of the body. So when you take a case history, where is it stuck? I mean, to explain, I suppose, if you look at nutrition and traditional nutrition, it's kind of looking at the combustion engine. So you put these things in, you utilize it, and you take these nutrients from it and you get this energy. Whereas electromagnetic nutrition is looking more at it from a sort of solar panel point of view. So if you look at a solar car, it's cleaner energy, it's more efficient energy. And really for us, that we really try and evaluate your ability to convert this sunlight or light into energy. And if you had a car, both of those examples would have a battery. But our inner cells are our battery that holds on to our energy. And so I always say to people, if you had a car, whichever sort of car that was, and the battery was full of sludge, you wouldn't expect the car to start, and it probably wouldn't. You wouldn't be shocked you would change the battery. If your body is full of sludge and the conductivity is down, you're going to get the same result. It can't send the energy that you've created across all the synapses and things that it needs to get it to the right point to be utilized. So this is looking at the evaluation. If you break down the term electrolyte Electrolyte is a conductor of electricity. That's what the electrolytes, magnesium, calcium, sodium, and potassium do.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, it's much more looking at the conductivity than it is just how much magnesium you have, how much potassium you have, or where they're placed.
I love that, because this is something that's so big right now in terms of, like, you know, people thinking, I need to get vitamin C, I need to get vitamin D, I need to get magnesium, I need to get all these things and put them into me. It's almost like it's not just as simple as that, in terms of, like, it's not about just getting more magnesium into your system. It's actually about, like, how your body's actually able to utilize that. And if it's not cleansed, and it has a lot of, say, as you're saying, sludge and congestion and a lot of buildup inside, you're not going to be able to use that.
Yeah, absolutely true. It can even be more challenging. It can be more negative. So almost the more biologically active the material is that you put into the body, the more it's going to respond and have to do something. But if the systems are already blocked, what's it going to do? Well, it's going to throw up a healing crisis or make people feel not so good. The art of naturopathy really is to make sure that all the points of elimination are open. They're functioning fully before you start to try and stimulate things. So I don't know if your listeners will know much about the sodium potassium pump. But, you know, during the day, we start to acidify. So when we're stood up, we basically start to enter sodium and calcium into the cell, which overall makes us slightly acidic. As we lie down, we're meant to then start changing the polarity, so potassium and magnesium enter the cell, making us alkaline. So one of the most basic questions you can ask yourself is, when you wake up in the morning, do you feel refreshed? If you don't, you pretty much know that process is not working fully. That's you know, you've got to be well alkalized to get up and face the day, and you should be full of beans or well alkalized at that point in time. And these are what electrolytes are meant to do. They charge fluid in and out of the cell. They constantly start to replenish the fluids so that the extracellular fluids are not too hostile to us. They're not too acidic. But if you've got points of elimination that are blocked and you can't get that moving properly, that's where you start to build up problems.
So in terms of, you know, predispositions and how people are, you know, aware, say, of their family history, and, you know, maybe aware of certain conditions that they have experienced in their own body, how understanding those predispositions can actually help to understand, like, where you are right now, and actually to empower you to be able to make those changes to change the way that your system is expressing, and to actually be able to heal the condition that you're experiencing.
Okay, well, I suppose it's the sort of nature or nurture question you've got to address first, which is, of course, orthodox medicine likes us to believe that we are all victim of our genes. Quite comforting if you think about it. There's nothing I can do to affect it. I can carry on in life, eating what I want, do what I want, behave like I want, because it's inevitable, you know, that my parents had a heart issue at 50. Therefore, I will have a heart issue at 50 because it's in my genes. What's the point? You know, you may as well just submit and give into it and make the most of each day. At one level, that's comforting. But then you start to question, how can this be? Because then they start talking to you about, well, you've got a problem here because you've got an inherited faulty gene. And you go, that's fine, but where did that one get inherited from? Who inherited the first faulty gene? Where did it come from? Were Adam and Eve created imperfect? I mean, there's lots of faulty genes going on. So you start to question that. And I've come to the conclusion, and I can explain a bit more why, that actually it's the cellular environment that creates the gene pattern. Therefore, if you can start to change the environment, you can start to change the gene patterns that are going on. And, you know, a classic way of showing that or proving that, there was a piece of research done some years ago where they looked at cancer patients, and they were trying to ascertain the vulnerability of meat eaters compared to vegetarians. They had this annoying subgroup of vegans, and within this group, they found that within 12 weeks rather, almost none of them got ill. So they sort of discounted and stopped looking at them at that point. But what they did observe was, and you know, that's odd in itself. If you think about it, you could eat chips every day and still be a vegan. I wouldn't say it's a particularly healthy diet, but okay, it's astonishing. But what they did notice was that within those 12 weeks, that it switched off 500 damaged gene patterns connected to breast cancer, cardiovascular disease, and diabetes. But even more extraordinarily, it's switched on 500 preventative ones. So it can show in a very short period of time by changing your diet. Now, I'm not suggesting that everyone should run off and be vegan, but it proves a very good point that genes are susceptible to change. And they would have to be for us to have all these inherited different types of damaged gene function. So there's a thing called the cell membrane. And the cell membrane is absolutely key. As Bruce Lipton would say in his book, The Biology of Belief, which is one of the best books I think I've ever read, it actually openly says, you know, there's no chance it's called the cell, it's not by chance it's called the cell membrane. The cell membrane is actually planning our evolution. So it's looking at the cellular, extracellular fluid pH, it's looking at its toxicity, and it's saying, well, look, guys, if we're going to survive, we're going to need to evolve to get used to this. And so the trick really is, can we evolve as quickly as the toxicity is created? I mean, that's when you sort of finish being on this planet, was when the toxicity wins. So there's always an evolution process going on. The body is constantly trying to adjust and to try and support us in this slightly odd situation. But for us, predispositions are, you know, if you look at insurance companies, insurance companies have a sort of obsession with what your grandparents suffered from or suffer from, your parents, what they suffered from, things that your siblings have suffered from. Why are they collecting all this data? Well, statistically behind all that, there is a higher chance that you will have some of those issues, granted. But actually, what they don't really account for is, of course, that when you're born, you're half your mum and half your dad, probably, or, you know, certainly a good percentage of each within it. But then you're taken home to their house. You're going to have their stresses. You're going to have their diet. You're going to have their, you know, influence on everything that you do. So until you leave home, pretty much your chances, I would think, of suffering with the same problems as they would be pretty equal to, your chances are quite high. But if you then marry and go and live with someone else who has a whole different approach to life, pretty quickly you can start to change that process. So it's, for me, it's too easy to say, look, you know, yes, we have a predisposition, we have a weakness towards certain issues when we're born, but those things are reversible, some quicker than others. But fundamentally, if you are acknowledging them, if you change your environment, if you change your diet, there is absolutely no doubt, given time, that you can change those things. That's why we only ever talk about predispositions rather than fixed genes.
And that's a whole different mindset, isn't it? Because it's something that takes you out of that victim consciousness, that it's like, it was done to me, I was born to this, you know, to these set of genes, and this is my family story, and it's just going to be inevitable that this happens.
I have a brother-in-law who told me, you know, don't get too used to me. My father died at this age, and his father died at this age, and pretty much I'm going to be gone at that point too. And there is a thing called point in the bone, which, you know, if you start to believe those things, you can create that reality. I'm a great believer of that. But there's absolutely no reason why they should, and I don't think he would. He's married an incredible cook, his wife, who eats very differently to how he was brought up. And so I would be very surprised. In fact, I know he's already lived beyond the age he thought he would live. And so, again, you know, we've got to be careful not to just assume that we're always going to follow the footpath. Yes, you know, if there's cardiovascular issues in ancestry, there might be that potential weakness there. But that doesn't mean that you can't address that over time and probably have the same chances as anyone else.
Yeah, absolutely. And so when you're kind of empowered with this information, it helps you to kind of go, okay, there are things that I can do. You know, actually it kind of reorientates you so that you can say, okay, what can I actually do that's going to be helpful to me? And then that starts a different type of set of way of thinking, and set, you know, a different set of behaviors will start following from that way of perceiving it.
I have a lot of sympathy for people who have given up on the grounds that they've bought into the whole gene concept. If you buy into the gene concept completely, of course, what is the point? We may as well just get on and enjoy what we've got. The minute you can understand the concept that actually you're not a victim of your genes, anything is possible. And great things are possible. And that's where things start to get exciting. It's called self-empowerment.
Self-empowerment, and that's something that was the thing, that was the cornerstone of like my journey with Barbara when I was, you know, starting off a decade ago. It was just like self-empowerment. I would write it in my diary every single day. You know, I was just like building myself up, and it was just the greatest gift ever. And that's really what I want to do with my own work and passing that on to others through this podcast and, you know, all the different types of ways I work with people. Because I just feel like it's just so important, especially right now when there's so much fear in the world, and that feels even more exaggerated right now, that it's like we actually have the potential to come home to ourselves and actually really see that we are really powerful co-creators. And yeah, that changes the whole story.
Yeah, and you know, the power within us, if you've only got to look at the placebo,
Yeah,
the placebo has had more benefit on more illnesses than any drug known to man.
that's amazing.
Yeah, that's inner belief. You know, again, I couldn't recommend enough Bruce Lipton's book, The Biology of Belief,
Yeah.
where he actually demonstrates very clearly how there's a biochemical change when you start to believe in something.
Mm,
Yeah, and so it's a very important to have a belief. And
yeah.
if that belief is also one that would mean that you can change your environment, can change your predisposition, my goodness, it's suddenly worth living for, isn't it? You can get quite excited about the potential. Where could this stop? You
Yeah.
know, and so, yeah, I think it is genuinely a very self-empowering message, which is
Yeah.
that you're not a victim to this. Of course, you've then got to understand how you got to this point, which is what Barbara, I think, did a lot with yourself and does with a lot of other people.
Yeah.
It's understanding your journey. How did you end up here?
Yeah.
What is the journey back to good health?
Absolutely. And yeah, just also another point of like just meeting people where they are. So what, you know, people are listening to this podcast today, and they might be thinking, well, I'm challenged with certain symptoms, or I might actually have a current health condition that I'm struggling with. I'd love you to talk about like just meeting people where they are in terms of like what supplements are great and helpful to help rejuvenate the mitochondria of the cell, and just kind of start instigating that healing process. I know it's not just take supplements, but just within kind of the whole holistic picture of like changing your diet, you know, making lifestyle adjustments, reducing stress, all the different things that really help to create a condition for healing. But just focusing in on like what supplements are great for that rejuvenation, which really is the kind of cornerstone of your whole health.
Okay, well, I suppose would need to start that by just also acknowledging Herring's law of cure,
Mm-hmm.
which is the key thing. Once you've been reminded that these are predispositions that are changeable, how does disease move?
Mm-hmm.
And I think what we're forgetting in the Western world is that disease doesn't just progress, it can also regress.
Mm-hmm.
And so a disease is a range of symptoms that you've been diagnosed as having at that point in time. You might be just on the border, you might be just diabetic, you might be extremely diabetic. It doesn't necessarily draw the picture of where you are on that line. You just fit nicely into the, let's say, diabetic or whatever area it is that one's looking at.
Yeah.
But the truth is that, as been shown on certain TV programs, you know, that they really can show that where you have autoimmune type issues, things like type 2 diabetes, has
Mm-hmm.
been reversed within a few weeks just through dietary changes. So we must remember that today we might have type 2 diabetes, but actually it is within us to address a lot of those things. And a lot of those are dietary type changes that we can make.
Yeah.
That empowerment is absolutely crucial. But where do we get the energy to fight this lot? Now that's where we start looking at mitochondrial function. Mitochondrial function is the latest sort of in word for the scientific nutritional people, and they make it sound very complicated when actually it's really quite simplistic. Think of your mitochondria a little bit like your solar panel.
Mm-hmm.
Now, over time, that solar panel starts to deteriorate. It starts to lose transparency, and therefore it is less effective at capturing the light and converting it into energy.
Yeah.
The same is true within your cells. So there's a thing called Heinrich Kramer's 16 stages of cellular change, where you start off with a cell which is aerobic, which is 80% oxygen and 20% glucose. And then as you move through the different 16 stages, at the other end, you've got something that's almost anaerobic,
Mm-hmm.
which is 80% glucose and 20% oxygen. So it's the pole opposite. Now, what we do know, for instance, is by the time you get to the almost anaerobic, it's only 1/16 as effective at converting light or energy or creating ATP.
Mm-hmm.
1/16th. So if you were in your eco-friendly carbon neutral house and I came along, and I'm sure this house would have solar panels all around it, and I threw bricks through 80% of it, inside you would have to start making choices. You'd have to switch off the TV, perhaps you'd have to dim the lights, but you'd probably keep the chest freezer going. The body is pretty much the same. So as its energy is reduced by reducing its ability to use mitochondria as an energy source, it has to start switching things off. And so over time, what we're also noting is the inner core temperature of the body is also dropping. So in answer to and I will mention some nutrients, but for me, the main thing that actually will drive health is having a good, clear mitochondria. Because if you can clear the mitochondria, if you can get it back to the aerobic cell, or closer to the aerobic cell, it will be more effective at taking the light and creating the ATP, which is the energy, cellular energy you need to ward off disease of all sorts. Without that, you really haven't got the energy. You're an ever-depleting thing. And of course, we're very used to older people having much less energy than us. You also see the odd older person who seems to have loads of energy.
And you're like, what's their secret? You're like, what's their secret?
What's going on here? And so the difference is their mitochondria is probably a lot clearer. Therefore, they're still tapping into light energy, which allows them to be useful and more fun and all the rest of those things. So for me, what we take out of the body will always be far greater than anything we can put in. And that's coming from someone who sells supplements. So, you know, do listen to that. It's very important. And for me, I look at things like Professor Arnold Ehret's work, the mucusless diet. And I'm not suggesting for a moment that people run off and do this, so let's be clear about that. But he was very much into fasting. It wasn't juice fasting, it was just fasting at this point in time. And he locked himself eventually in a room. I think he did several different sort of fasts that he was doing. The final one, I think, was something like 46 days. But as a professor, he did a range of checks on himself where he compared, you know, going in and compared himself coming out. And coming back out after 46 days, he was physically stronger and more mentally alert.
That's amazing.
It allowed his body to cleanse. So if you think about what we're really doing is we're toxifying our body by constantly wanting to go down this route. And if you look at ancient religions, and this isn't a religious comment, by the way, this is a biochemical comment or a electromagnetic comment, but you know, all religions talked about being enlightened. Now, in my view, enlightened isn't necessarily a sort of spiritual term. I think it's actually our ability to hold and convert light. Nearly all of these religions would recommend a day of fasting a week. And so that was allowing the light in, and therefore if you can allow the light in, if you can convert that energy properly, you actually are, by our definition, enlightened.
I love that.
So for me, less is more, particularly when it comes to mitochondrial function. When you look at nearly all of the research, it shows that eating reasonably small amount of food over time is actually by far the best route for longevity. It challenges the body far less, but also the byproduct of this combustion engine version of nutrition is it has waste matter, it has toxicity. So that has to go into the system. And if the system is overburdened, it will start to appear within cellular level. So it's a sort of backup energy nutrition rather than your main energy. So for me, clearing the mitochondria, whether it be using juicing, whether it be doing intermittent fasting, will be always far superior to anything that I could add. I can't charge you for that information. It's free information, and it should be free to all. It should be great news. Doing nothing is great. So at the other level, of course, when you start to look at when things have gone wrong. So normally this would be someone in middle age who is struggling with fatigue type issues. What can you do for them? Well, I would initially try and weigh out whether they were good enough, or healthy enough to be able to do some intermittent fasting or some basic juicing. Other things to help nutritionally, well, lecithin or choline as it's often known, or phosphatidylcholine, they're all names pretty much for the same phospholipid, helps to emulsify and mobilize fats in liver tissue. So liver is actually really in charge of looking after fluid levels and planning those levels. Everyone seems to think it's kidneys. Kidneys are filters. Liver really controls things like bile, which is what actually makes the bowel work properly, and the rest of those things, which is why disease or disease or discomfort tends to start in bowel, because the liver stops allowing the bile to be created for the feces to flow on. So that tends to be where it is all rooted. But for, you know, for me, I would be putting them on a juice regime. I'd be looking at certain juicing, ideally not centrifuge, because that damages the electrocharge of the liquid.
Yeah.
So you could try and look at something that would macerate it rather than spin it. But juicing would absolutely be my chosen way. Yeah. Adding something like lecithin in, adding something like your vitamin D in, working with things like magnesium, all of these things can help, and they can charge those fluids positively. And we do lack particularly things like magnesium, and all of those things can help to support us on our way. But I can only say nothing can touch you like a proper juice fast or a juice, you know, cleanse.
Yeah.
For me, that's the base of it. And you've got to get people to a point where they are healthy enough to be able to fast for a day with no side effects, or to be able to do a juice fast without any negative side effects. To me, that's a healthy person. If you can't do it, I think there are issues, and I think that's where you need to start looking at it. So mitochondria, yes, vitamin D, yes, choline, yes, things like magnesium. They are aids to move you back towards self-empowerment. That's not something I want to see people sat on forever. Even though it would be sort of monetarily the best thing for me, it isn't the way to go. And so for me, it's all about trying to return integrity. You know, we weren't sent down to this planet with a pot of magnesium on our back or a pot of vitamin D. We were sent down.
Keep taking.
That's right.
Yeah.
You know, whoever it is didn't reach down and go, here you go, you're going to need some of this. We are built in a way that we shouldn't need to supplement our diet. And for me, Conella is all about trying to get you back to a point where you don't need us, rather than actually constantly keep adding. So leaving you in your position, keep adding more and more nutrients and say, well, it's not working so well. Okay, we'll take an extra one of those and an extra one of that.
Yeah.
You're just really suspending that person in animation. You're making them very reliant on us, when really it's all about returning that integrity. And we have inside us, the good news is we have all the ingredients we need. We've actually got too many things, and so it always starts with a cleanse.
Yeah, I love that. And for people that are diving into, like, looking at, say, their cupboards, and they're saying, okay, I have got supplements because, you know, this is what we're kind of told, you have your diet and then you supplement certain things, but are there certain ones that we should be avoiding in terms of like bioavailability, like ones that our bodies really don't take in? So just for people to have that like in mind when they are looking at what they have and what they're looking to maybe add into their health regime.
Okay, well, again, a lot of supplement companies spend a lot of money educating people on why they need them.
Yeah.
And, you know, the form is everything. So without trying to make it too difficult to follow, there's a process of organic and inorganic chemistry. Now, by this, I don't mean that it was organically certified, Soil Association of certified. I'm talking about something that appears within living tissue.
Okay.
So a lot of nutrients that are marketed, for instance, you know, everyone thinks they need calcium. The average British diet, and I know we're in Ireland, but I'm sure it's pretty similar.
Yeah.
The main source of your calcium is actually greens. It is very unusual, even with the average British diet, which is an appalling diet, to be deficient in calcium. And so as a supplement company, we don't even have a calcium supplement. So it's not something that's on our agenda.
Yeah.
Now, using the wrong sort of calcium it can be quite negative for a range of reasons. So there's something called calcium carbonate. Calcium carbonate is a posh word for chalk. So way I would describe it, if you and I were walking along the White Cliffs of Dover and I bent down and picked up a lump of chalk and I said to you, there you go, that would be £6, you'd probably laugh at me. But that's actually what most supplements are. Inorganic rock that you're going to take as the supplement. Now, what's wrong with that? Well, it's a little bit like taking an antacid each day. It's very alkaline. So you take this thing and it reduces your stomach acidity. By reducing your stomach acidity, you reduce your ability to break down your food. If you haven't already got a problem, you probably quickly might get one. And also it will block the absorption of other key nutrients. And the calcium within the rock is very hard for the body to break down and get. So although there's a lot of calcium in this rock, your utilization of it is very poor. So I always say to people, whatever brands you buy, avoid inorganic chemistry, which is easier said than done, because most forms of calcium are calcium carbonate. Most forms of magnesium are magnesium oxide, which is a byproduct of rust. It's actually a very effective laxative within its function. Its absorption of magnesium is very poor, but it has a high elemental weight, so it has a high label claim. So where you start seeing these capsules that deliver 100, 200, 300 milligrams of calcium or magnesium, that's usually the forms that they're using. Very cheap to produce, not very effective within the body. Now, what we use and what I think, you know, a lot of the other companies should be using, and there are quite a few who do use these things too, but it's things like citrates.
Yeah.
So citrate, we create about 1.5 kilos in body weight a day of citrate that fits into our Krebs cycle. So its absorption is very high, its toxicity is very low. And the way I would say it, I live in Devon, so if I'm going to go to London, I'm going to go up the M5. Now it's the most direct route, and therefore everything seems to travel quite nicely. Now, if I put citrate into the body, let's say magnesium citrate, it's like putting a couple of extra lorries on the M5. You're not really going to notice them. It's a main route in, it's pretty well dealing with all of that. When it comes to some of the other organic forms, things like, I quite like aspartates, I've always liked aspartates, the body only creates very small pools of this a day. So when you put in quite a large amount of magnesium as aspartate, it's a bit like taking those lorries and sticking them on a B road. They're going to jam up, they're going to be noticed. And so you've got to be very careful for me about the form and the routes that you use. So for me, never use inorganic chemistry. Ideally use organic chemistry, and this is this form that appears within the living tissue. And again, you see all of these trials that would say, you know, this person got better from ME, or this person got better from whatever, and they took 400 milligrams of magnesium a day. And I go, okay, is that gross or elemental? And they go, what do you mean? I say, well, is that 400 milligrams of magnesium oxide, or is that 400 milligrams of magnesium? They go, well, I don't know. The other thing is, again, the form that they use. If the trial was using magnesium citrate, if you want to replicate it, forgetting for a moment the Beauchamp thing, that of course we're all slightly different, but let's assume we were saying for a moment, is that, you know, if they got that result with a citrate, that's what you want to use. So not all magnesiums are equal. Not all calciums are equal. And what a lot of people don't know when you look at biochemistry is they all have different bioavailability. They have different absorption levels. And that's why we tend to use citrates in most cases. I mean, there are cases, things like, you know, selenium citrate wouldn't be particularly well used. We use selenium methionine, as most people would for that. But across the board, wherever we can, we tend to use citrate. So again, you know, if one was doing calcium, it would be citrate, magnesium, potassium, zinc, all of those would tend to be in the citrate form.
That's really fascinating. Yeah, because it is a bit of a minefield out there. There's so many things that you can be getting and can get confused by, and there's a lot of marketing that kind of says get this and don't get this, you know. So that's great to be able to just kind of bring it back to the basics of like what's actually in the organic tissue itself, and that's going to be the most helpful.
Yeah, and knowing whether you're getting an elemental amount or whether you're getting a gross amount, because again, when looking at labels, it's not always that clear. It should be, but it's not. Big difference between sort of 400 milligrams of magnesium oxide and 400 milligrams of magnesium. It's a dramatic difference that's there. But the form, absolutely, whenever you look at this research, and this is where the media aren't great when they report these things, you know, I mean, 1 minute we're everyone's hero, the next minute we're everyone's criminal sort of thing. But actually the truth is somewhere in the middle. Good nutrition kind of makes sense. But rarely do they actually mention the form. And that, I think, is very unhelpful for the consumer, because the form is so important.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, they come back to you and say, well, I tried that magnesium. I tried it for 6 months. It did nothing. And I go, well, what did you use? I was taking X amount of magnesium oxide. Well, yeah, it was never going to work.
Yeah. And just something that I suppose for a lot of people, especially in my community, would be on this kind of transition into like plant-based eating. And the common question that comes to me is always like, you know, should I be supplementing with any sort of vitamin and mineral that I might not be getting from my food if I'm taking out like meat and dairy and things like that? What are
There
the
are
kind of,
some key ones.
yeah.
I mean, there are key nutrients that you do even if you're not on a vegan diet. So everyone says, well, this is the weakness of the vegan diet. You need to perhaps look at supporting iodine level. It's one thing that they've noticed. Choline is another one. Vitamin D is another one. And of course, B12, which it's well known for. The truth is that, however, we've talked about how a vegan diet, for instance, has helped within 12 weeks to switch off a lot of damaged gene patterns. All of that is true, but I do think that it could probably do with the good support of a good multi.
Yeah.
And so we do a particular multi that we feel that has most of the things in that you would need to support that. It's a thing we do called MaxiMag Plus, which has a full range of the key nutrients that you would need to help support your daily nutritional needs.
That's brilliant. So any final words on helping people to reclaim their health and their power, especially at this time where we are being, we're being asked to stay at home, and, we just have a lot more time on our hands to be kind of thinking about our health and our habits. And it's a great time to just reflect and also create the space for just new supportive ways of being.
Yeah, well, I can only speak as we sort of find it in our own family, which is that they say that people that touch and hug live a lot longer. And I think that to give your child or your wife a hug a little bit more often than maybe you would if you got a bit more time is a very positive physical and mental thing to do. I think when looking at the diet, it's a very good opportunity to kick out some of the bad habits, little things that sneak in. So maybe there's a bit more tea drinking that should go on, or there could be a little bit more salt going on, or certain fatty foods. And to perhaps review the idea of looking at introducing over this period, however long we're going to be locked down, I would say, unless you've got something quite serious that you need to discuss with a doctor first, but you could look to experiment, even just doing a day of juicing and see how you feel. Again, don't go over the top, but a pint of something like carrot juice or a pint of something like green juicing, I think is a wonderful way to really start to identify. You'll find that your digestion will speed up rather, and your energy will slightly increase. The other thing you can introduce is some smoothies. So again, I mean, I don't know how many people have blenders, but most people should have blenders by now. And again, you can take some fruit, which is, something like a mango, bananas, and whatever you want to taste of, something like raspberries. You could I always put a probiotic in it and some lecithin in it myself. It comes out like a sort of healthy Angel Delight. You're probably too young to remember.
Oh no, I do remember Angel Delight.
Instant Whip and Angel Delight. They were sort of my era, but it comes out as a healthy version of that. And so that tends to sit, in the digestive system and let sugar out over time. So it actually can switch off all these sort of the need for nibbles and sugar highs and sugar lows. And I would say it's what I'm doing here with the family, and it's something I think you can do quite easily, which really can demonstrate for you how quickly you can start to feel so much better. And also to use this time in the positive way that we've all been so time poor. The idea that supermarkets, that we no longer have a high street, that we have to run off after work and load up all our bags and put them in the car. Everything's about time. We don't have time for this. We don't have time for that. That's our excuse for most things. Right now, we have a lot of time. So now is the time to really sit with each other and really try and understand each other and try and reconnect with each other. And the importance of the nuclear family, which has been so blown apart by the need for, you grow up in a certain area, you go off to university, you then go and get a job, and, the parents spend the rest of their life sort of following around trying to get a few moments with you. Right now, we've got almost unlimited time together. So it's a great opportunity to just talk to each other, and also to try and pick out each day one good thing that happened to you, one positive thought, and to share that with the family. Therefore, you start to think more positively across the board. The amount of people who keep saying to me, "Oh my God, it's awful, we're all on lockdown." I said, "I'm having a ball." absolutely loving this. I mean, all right, the weather's nice and warm. That's a
Yeah,
real plus. But the truth is, there is an upside to this, and that
yeah,
is that they've got time back.
absolutely. So Andy, thank you so much for coming on here today. It's been a total pleasure, and this has, yeah, I can't wait to share this episode. So thank you so much for sharing all of your wisdom, and I think people are going to take a lot of these nuggets and start applying them to their lives. So I can't wait to hear what everyone feels inspired to do based on what you've shared today. So thank you so much.
Oh, well, bless you. It's very much my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.